The elevator doors opened on the 38th floor, and Ingrid Lavoie walked in carrying 2 coffees, a laptop bag slipping off her left shoulder, and absolutely no idea she was about to change her entire life. She was supposed to be on the 22nd floor. She had pressed the button. She was certain she had pressed the button. The lobby panel had been confusing. Half the numbers were covered by a handwritten out-of-surface sign taped crookedly over the right side, and she had done her best. She always did her best. It just rarely went the way she planned. The hallway on 38 was different from 22. She noticed that immediately. The carpet was darker, the walls were glass. There were no cubicles, no half-eaten muffins on desks, no motivational posters about teamwork featuring stock photos of people in kayaks. There was one long corridor, a reception desk made of black marble, and a woman sitting behind it who looked at Ingrid the way airport security looks at someone who forgot to take off their belt. "Can I help you?" the woman said. Her name tag read Louise. Her tone suggested she would not be helping anyone today. "I'm from staffing," Ingrid said, because that was technically true. She was a temp placed by Hartwell Solutions, sent to assist with overflow admin work at Caldwell Maritime Group for the week. She had her badge. She had her laptop. She had 2 coffees because she always brought an extra, old habit from the years she'd spent working at a bakery on St. Laurent, where the morning rush taught her that caffeine was a social currency. "Staffing doesn't come to 38, Louise said. "Right," Ingrid said. "I think I pressed the wrong." "The meeting has already started." Ingrid looked to her left. Through the glass wall she could see a conference room, a long table, 8 or 9 people in suits with the particular posture of people who billed by the hour. At the head of the table, a man in a charcoal jacket was standing, one hand braced on the table, looking at something on the screen behind him with an expression that suggested the screen had personally offended him. He was tall, dark hair, close cut, jaw like an architectural decision. Ingrid noted these things the way you note the weather, neutrally, automatically, without meaning to. She started. The glass door to the conference room swung open. "Louise," the man said, not looking up from the folder he'd opened. "I need the Henderson file. The one from March, not the revised." He stopped. He looked at Ingrid. Ingrid looked at him. "Who are you?" he said. "I pressed the wrong button," she said. There was a silence. One of the suited people at the table turned around. Someone coughed. The man. She would learn later his name was Grant Ashworth, CEO of Caldwell Maritime Group, youngest person to run a publicly traded shipping company in Canadian history, mentioned twice in report on Business Magazine. Widely described by his staff as precise, which was a polite word for something less flattering, looked at her for a long moment. "The wrong button," he repeated. "The lobby panel has a sign covering half the numbers. I did my best." Another silence. Then, because she was holding 2 coffees and one of them was getting cold and she had always hated wasting things, she held one out toward him. "Do you want this? It's an Americano. I brought an extra." Someone in the conference room made a sound that could have been a laugh, quickly swallowed. Grant Ashworth looked at the coffee. He looked at her. He took the coffee. "Louise," he said without breaking eye contact with Ingrid. "Have someone show her to 22. I can find it myself," Ingrid said pleasantly. "I'll just go back down and press a different button." She turned, hitched her bag back up her shoulder, and walked to the elevator. She pressed 22. The doors closed. She drank her coffee. She did not think about his eyes, which had been an unusually specific shade of gray. She did not think about this at all. She was very successful at not thinking about it for approximately 4 minutes, until she sat down at her assigned desk on 22 and pulled up the file she'd been sent to organize, and found that someone had saved it under 17 different versions with names like Final and Final Revised and Actual Final Do Not Touch, and she had to laugh, because some things were the same no matter what floor you were on. The rest of Tuesday passed without incident. Wednesday was a different story. Ingrid arrived at 7:45 because she was always early, not from anxiety but from logistics. She had a 40-minute commute on the 80 bus from Rosemont, and the bus was either exactly on time or 8 minutes late, never anything in between, and she had learned to build in buffer time the way you build in buffer time for border crossings. Assume the worst, hope for better, bring a book. She had reorganized 4 years of shipping contracts by 9 a.m. She had color-coded them. She had created a master index. The woman whose desk she was borrowing, Janet, on maternity leave, had a cactus that looked like it hadn't been watered since the Conservatives were last in power, and Ingrid watered it with her spare tea. At 10:15, a man from the finance department appeared at her elbow. He introduced himself as the assistant controller, handed her a binder, and asked if she could check the figures against a digital spreadsheet and flag any discrepancies. "Cross-referencing," he said. Just routine. Ingrid liked cross-referencing. There was something satisfying about it, the way a number either matched or it didn't, the way errors announced themselves if you paid attention. Her father had been an accountant. He used to say that numbers didn't lie, they just waited for you to catch up to them. She started with the revenue columns. Everything matched. She moved to the expense reconciliation, still clean. She was 3/4 through when she hit a figure in the third quarter logistics report that stopped her cold. She looked at it. She looked at the binder. She looked back at the screen. The spreadsheet showed $4.2 million in contracted freight charges for the Port of Vancouver terminal third quarter. The binder, the physical records, signed off by 2 different department heads, showed $2.9 million, a difference of $1.3 million. She checked it 3 times, the way her father had taught her. Once for the error, once to confirm, once to make sure you haven't made the error yourself. The gap was still there. She flagged it with a yellow sticky note and kept going. By 11:30, she had found 4 more discrepancies. They weren't random. They were consistent, always in the same direction, always in the logistics column, always in amounts small enough to avoid the automatic audit threshold but large enough collectively to add up to something significant. She did the math on a notepad, added the sticky notes, sat back. $4.8 million. "Excuse me," she said to the assistant controller, who had reappeared with a second binder. "I think there's a problem." She did not intend to end up on the 38th floor again. That part was not planned. What happened was this. The assistant controller took her flagged notes, went pale in a specific way that people go pale when something confirms a fear they've been trying not to have, and disappeared for 20 minutes. When he came back, he had a director with him, and the director had a phone. And 30 minutes after that, Ingrid was standing outside the conference room on the 38th floor with her notepad and her color-coded binders, waiting while Louise made a call. Grant Ashworth opened the door himself. He looked at her notepad. He looked at her. Something shifted in his expression. Not warmth exactly, more like the recalibration of an instrument that's just encountered an unexpected variable. "You again," he said. "I took the stairs this time," she said. "To be safe." He almost smiled. She saw it happen and then not happen, the way you see a fish rise to the surface and then think better of it. "Come in," he said. The conference room was empty now. He sat at the head of the table and she sat 2 seats down, because sitting directly beside him felt like standing too close to something that generated its own weather. She spread her notes out. She walked him through it systematically. Here, here, and here. This column versus this record. This total versus this total. He didn't interrupt. He asked 3 questions, each precise, each aimed at the exact joint where her explanation could have been weak. She answered all 3 without hesitating, because she'd already thought of those joints herself and checked them. When she finished, he was quiet for a moment. "How long did this take you?" he said. "About 2 hours. I wasn't looking for it. I was just cross-referencing. No one else caught it. The amounts were below the automatic threshold. You'd have to look at them all together to see the pattern." She paused. "Your system is probably designed to catch big errors. This was a lot of small ones." Grant Ashworth looked at her notepad. He looked at her. "What's your name?" he said. "Ingrid Lavoie. I'm a temp. I'm supposed to be on 22. "I know where you're supposed to be," he said, and something in the way he said it made it sound like a different kind of sentence than the words themselves suggested. He stood. He picked up her notepad, the original, not a copy. "I need to make some calls. Can you stay available today?" "I'm here until Friday," she said. "That's what the contract says." "Good," he said, and then, as an afterthought, as she was gathering her remaining papers, "Thank you for the coffee. Yesterday. It was decent." Ingrid looked at him. "It was a good Americano," she agreed. She went back downstairs. She sat at Janet's desk. She watered the cactus again because it seemed like the kind of plant that had been through a lot and deserved some extra attention. By Thursday, the finance director had been placed on administrative leave pending an internal review. By Friday morning, 3 other irregularities had surfaced, not ones Ingrid had found, but ones the forensic accountants found once they knew where to look. The total figure, when the final estimate came in, was closer to $6.2 million. Ingrid heard about this secondhand from the assistant controller who stopped by her desk on his lunch break looking like a man who had narrowly avoided something large and fast-moving. "You saved the company a significant amount of money," he said. "I just cross-referenced," she said. "You were the only one who did." She thought about that. The thing about cross-referencing was that it wasn't clever exactly. It was just patient. It was just being willing to check the thing twice, and then a third time, and not assume that a signed document meant everything in it was correct. Her father had spent 30 years as an accountant, and he had never once assumed a signed document was automatically correct. He said the signature just meant someone had committed to a number, not that they'd verified it. She missed her father. He had died 2 years ago in the autumn on a Tuesday, in the house in Laval where she'd grown up. She still sometimes caught herself wanting to call him with news. This would have been news worth calling about. She was finishing up the last of the contract files. Janet's desk was genuinely pristine now, everything indexed and backed up, and even the cactus looking more optimistic, when her phone buzzed. The number was internal, from the main switchboard. "Mrs. Lavoie," said Louise, in a tone that had shifted perceptibly from Monday. "Mr. Ashworth would like to see you before you leave today." He was standing by the window when she came in. The view from the 38th floor looked out over the St. Lawrence. She hadn't noticed it on Wednesday, too focused on her notes, but now she saw it. The water in the late afternoon light, the bridges, the shapes of the South Shore beyond. It was the kind of view that cost money and also quietly reminded you how much money it cost. "I wanted to thank you properly," Grant said, turning. He'd taken his jacket off. He was in a white shirt, sleeves rolled to the elbows, which was apparently what Grant Ashworth looked like when he was being informal. It was a lot. She noted this neutrally. She was very neutral about it. "You already said thank you," she said. "I said decent about the coffee. That's not the same thing. Fair point." He gestured at the chairs. They sat closer this time, across the corner of the table rather than separated by its length. He had her original notepad on the table in front of him, and she noticed he'd added his own annotations in the margins, small and precise, in a dark green pen. "I've been doing this for 11 years, he said. "This company, and before that my family's logistics operation in Halifax. I've had 6 different finance teams. I've had auditors, controllers, external reviews." He paused. "You were here for 3 days. I wasn't trying to find anything. I was just doing the job I was given. That's what makes it remarkable." She looked at him. He looked at her. This happened for a moment longer than a professional conversation strictly required. "Can I ask you something?" she said. "Yes. Why did you take the coffee on Monday? You didn't know me. You didn't know what was in it." He considered this with the seriousness of a man who considered things seriously. "You held it out without any agenda," he said. "People usually approach me with an agenda. You were just managing a situation. Trying not to waste a coffee, that's very perceptive for a Monday morning." "I'm perceptive on all mornings. It's one of my better qualities." A pause. "I have a limited number of them, so I keep track." She laughed. She hadn't expected to. He hadn't expected her to either. She could see it, the slight surprise in his expression, and then something that looked like satisfaction, careful and contained. "Your contract ends today," he said. "Yes, Hartwell Solutions. You're a temp, been doing it for 2 years. Since I moved back to Montreal from Ottawa." She didn't say why she'd moved back. That the last 2 years in Ottawa had involved a relationship that ended the way slow-motion things end, where you see it coming for months and it still shocks you when it finally stops. And he didn't ask, though she had the sense he noticed the pause. "I'd like to offer you a permanent position," he said. "Not in admin, in compliance review. We clearly need someone who actually looks at the numbers." Ingrid was quiet. She looked at the view, the river, the light, all of it. "I'm not a forensic accountant," she said. "I don't have credentials for that." "I know what you don't have," he said. "I'm more interested in what you do have." Another pause, and something in his tone shifted, almost imperceptibly. "Though we can also discuss credentials if you want them. The company would support continuing education for the right candidate. You just met me on Monday. You've given me more useful information in 3 days than most people give me in a quarter." She looked at him. He was, she decided, either very good at reading people or genuinely meant what he said, and she had spent enough time around people who were good at performing sincerity to know the difference. This felt like the second thing. "Can I think about it?" she said. "Of course. Take the weekend." He slid a card across the table. Plain white, just his name and a number. "No pressure." She picked it up. "That's very Canadian of you," she said. "The no pressure thing." "I'm from Halifax," he said. "We're constitutionally incapable of pressure tactics." She laughed again. He smiled. A real one this time, reaching the gray eyes, and she thought about how a real smile on a face that rarely offered them was a genuinely unfair amount of information to receive on a Friday afternoon. She called her sister from the bus home. Her sister, Margot, was 32, lived in Verdun, and had an opinion about everything delivered at approximately 1.5 times normal conversational speed. When Ingrid described the week, the wrong elevator, the coffee, the discrepancies, the job offer, Margot was quiet for so long that Ingrid checked her phone to see if the call had dropped. "Margot, I'm processing," Margot said. You accidentally stumbled into a $6 million fraud, handed it to the CEO personally, and he offered you a job, all in 1 week? I also watered a cactus, Ingrid. What is he like? He's very precise, serious. He has a green pen and he annotated my notepad. That's either extremely attractive or deeply alarming. I haven't decided yet. You've decided, Margot said. You just don't want to say it on the bus. Ingrid looked out the window. The city moved past, familiar and early spring cold, the kind of cold that makes everything look very clear. Saint Denis, Beaubien, the long residential blocks of Rosemont with their outside staircases and snow still piled in the corners of front yards. He said no pressure, she said. Of course he did. He's offering you a compliance job, not proposing. I know that. Do you? Margot said. Because you sound like someone who has spent the last 40 minutes thinking about his eyes. Ingrid did not answer this, which was, of course, an answer. She took the weekend. She made a list. She was a list person, had been since childhood, something her mother had called methodical and her father had called a gift. The list had a column for reasons to take the job and a column for reasons not to. The reasons not to column had things like, strange situation, fast, what if it's awkward, you barely know him. The reasons to take it column had, stable income, interesting work, the cactus needs someone, and this she wrote in small letters and then crossed out and then wrote again. He has a real smile that he doesn't show very often, and those are the ones worth sticking around for. She crossed it out again. She left it crossed out, but she could still see the words underneath. On Sunday evening she texted the number on the card. I'd like to take the position. When can we start? The reply came in 4 minutes, which was either fast for a CEO or indicated that he'd been checking his phone, and she chose not to speculate about which. Monday, 8 a.m. Take the elevator to 38. I'll have someone meet you so you don't have to guess the button. She put her phone down. She picked it up again. I found 22 just fine on my own eventually, she wrote. You took the stairs, he replied. That's not the same thing. She smiled at her phone in her apartment on a Sunday night, alone, which was, she thought, possibly the most hope she'd felt in 2 years. Monday arrived the way good things often do, not dramatically, not with fanfare, just quietly present, like a window that's been there all along and you finally opened it. Ingrid wore her good blazer, the deep blue one she saved for things that mattered. She took the 80 bus. She arrived at 7:50. In the lobby, a young man from reception was waiting with a visitor badge that said permanent staff, and she felt something shift in her chest at those words. Small and solid, like a key turning. On 38, Louise met her with the faintest possible smile and said that Mr. Ashworth had left a note. The note, on company letterhead in dark green pen, said, "The Henderson files are still a disaster. When you have a moment," she laughed. She took off her coat. She sat down at the desk that was apparently now hers. It had a window, she noticed, which was either luck or deliberate, and she suspected it was not luck, and she opened her laptop. Grant Ashworth appeared at the door of his office at 8:05. He looked at her. She looked at him. You actually came, he said. He said it like a fact, but underneath the fact was something else. I took the elevator, she said. Pressed 38 on purpose. Good, he said. That word again, the same one as before, and this time she heard it clearly for what it was. A man who did not say things he didn't mean, saying that this particular Monday morning, was a good thing. She turned back to her screen. He went into his office. Through the glass wall she could see him at his desk, already working, already precise and contained in the way he always was. But once, in the middle of the morning, she looked up and found him looking back, and he didn't look away immediately the way people do when they're caught. He just held it for a moment, steady and unhurried, the way a person looks when they've decided something. She held it too. Then she went back to the Henderson files, which were, as advertised, an absolute disaster, and she felt, for the first time in a long time, exactly where she was supposed to be. That spring was the kind of spring that Montreal does when it's trying to apologize for February. Sudden and generous, everything blooming at once, the terraces opening overnight, people appearing on sidewalks with the slightly stunned expressions of people who had forgotten what warm felt like. Ingrid had been on 38 for 6 weeks when Grant asked if she wanted to get coffee. Not in the boardroom, not in the kitchen on 38, but outside, a place on Peel Street that he apparently went to on mornings when he needed to think about something that wasn't work. Is this a meeting? She asked. No, he said. Just checking, she said. The place on Peel Street was small and serious about its espresso, the kind of place that didn't have flavored syrups and didn't apologize for it. They sat at a corner table. He had an Americano. She had one too, and when he noticed, she watched him put together the information and decide not to comment on it, which told her something about him. that he noticed things and chose carefully which ones to mention. They talked for 2 hours. About Halifax, about her father, about the year she'd spent after university working in Banff at a hotel accounts department and hiking on her days off and thinking about what she actually wanted. About his decision to leave his family's company and start fresh in Montreal, which his father hadn't spoken to him about for 8 months and now called every Sunday. About the difficulty of being someone who saw patterns in things, in numbers, in people, in the way situations tended to go, when most people found the pattern seeing exhausting to be around. Most people, he said, want you to not notice things. My ex said I was too observant, she said. He meant it as a criticism. He was wrong, Grant said, simply flatly the way he said true things. She looked at him across the table. Outside, Peel Street was filling up with lunch-hour foot traffic, people with places to be, and the two of them were sitting here in no hurry at all, which was not a thing she would have predicted about Grant Ashworth, CEO, previously described to her by the assistant controller as a man who scheduled his schedule. "You're not what I expected," she said. "What did you expect?" "Someone who takes things less personally." He considered this. "I take things correctly," he said. "Not too personally, not personally enough. I've been working on the calibration." "How's that going?" "Better recently," he said, and looked at her, and left that sentence exactly where it was. The summer moved. The river turned that particular flat blue it becomes in July. The farmers' markets opened on Atwater, and Ingrid went on Saturday mornings and sometimes brought things back to the office on Monday. Good bread, cheese from the Laurentians, honey from a farm near St. Jean. Grant, who ate at his desk and ordered the same lunch every day from the same 2 restaurants on rotation, started appearing in the kitchen on Monday mornings with the slightly self-conscious air of someone who has decided to do a new thing and is not sure how to do it naturally. He was not naturally a person who lingered. He was a person who moved with purpose efficiently from one task to the next, but he started lingering. Not long, 5 minutes, 10, but enough. Enough that Louise noticed and said nothing, which Ingrid had learned meant that Louise approved. There was a night in August when the company held its annual client reception at a venue on the river, glass walls and low lights, and the kind of event that required Ingrid to wear the dress she'd been saving since she'd bought it in a fit of optimism 2 years ago and then never had occasion for. She arrived and Grant was already there, talking to someone she didn't recognize, and he stopped mid-sentence when he saw her. "You look," he started. "Professional," she supplied. "I was going to say something else," he said. "I know," she said. "But we're at a work event." He looked at her for a moment, assessing, recalibrating. "Fair," he said. But later in the evening, when the speeches were done and the crowd had thinned and they were standing by the windows looking out at the river in the dark, the lights of the South Shore reflected in the water, he said, quietly, without looking at her. "You always know exactly what you're doing." "Not always," she said. "I pressed the wrong elevator button. Best mistake you ever made," he said. She looked at him then. He was looking at the river. After a moment he looked back, and in the way that things happen, not dramatically, not suddenly, but as the natural conclusion of a series of true things, he took her hand. Just held it. Steady and quiet, like a decision that had been made some time ago and was only now being said out loud. She held his hand back. She called Margot's that night from a taxi. "Well?" Margot said. She'd clearly been waiting. He held my hand. A pause. "Grant Ashworth, the CEO, yes, at the work event by the window, looking at the river." Margot made a sound that was either delight or vindication, possibly both. "I told you," she said. "I told you on the bus. You said I'd already decided. And had you?" Ingrid watched the city go past outside the taxi window, the lit-up terraces, the summer night still warm, someone's patio radio playing something she couldn't quite hear. "Maybe," she said. "Maybe from the coffee." "From the first Monday," Margot said. It wasn't a question. "From the first Monday," Ingrid said. They were not a couple who announced things dramatically. That was not who either of them was. They moved from what they'd been to what they were gradually and honestly, the way the seasons change in Quebec. Not overnight, but undeniably. There was a first dinner that was not a meeting. There was a second that was also clearly not a meeting, but which neither of them labeled. There was an autumn Saturday when she went with him to look at an apartment he was considering in the Plateau, because he said he wanted a second opinion, and she said she was good at second opinions. And they walked through the place with the October light coming through old windows, and he said nothing, but she noticed he kept looking at her when she paused somewhere, tracking what she was drawn to. He took the apartment. She thought about this later and thought about the way he'd watched her move through it and thought that he had very probably already decided. He was, she had learned, A person who decided things quietly and then waited for the world to catch up. Winter came. The first real snow fell on a Tuesday. She was on 38 when it started, and someone said, "Look," and everyone looked up from their screens, and for a moment the whole floor was quiet, watching it come down over the river. Grant appeared from his office. He stood beside her at the window. "First snow," she said. "I know," he said. "I've been watching it since 9. She looked at him. He was watching the snow with the expression of a man who was allowing himself to simply watch snow without scheduling it, and she understood that this was for him a kind of progress. She leaned her shoulder against his, lightly. He didn't move away. He put his hand in the small of her back, the quietest possible claim, and they stood there while the snow came down and the river disappeared into white. The spring after that, on a Saturday at the Atwater market, between the cheese stall and the bread stall, in the noise and color of it, with a bag of carrots in her hand and absolutely no plan, he turned to her and said, "I want to marry you." Not a question quite. Not a demand either. More like a person who has been adding up a set of figures for a long time and has finally arrived, with certainty, at a total. She looked at him. He looked at her. Around them, people moved with baskets and children and dogs, all the ordinary Saturday motion of a city being itself. "You could have picked a more dramatic moment," she said. "I thought about it," he said. "I was going to do the river at sunset, or the restaurant on the mountain. But then I was standing here and you were holding carrots and you were laughing at something the vendor said, and it was you. Just you. That was the moment." She stood with the carrots. She thought about the wrong elevator button on a March Monday. She thought about her father, who would have liked Grant's green pen and his habit of saying true things. She thought about Margot's voice on the bus. "You've decided, you just don't want to say it." "Yes," she said. He exhaled, and she realized he'd been holding it, the breath, probably since he'd said the words. This man who took things correctly, not too personally, not personally enough. He had been holding his breath. She put her free hand in his, carrots and all. "Yes," she said again, "because some things are worth saying twice." They were married the following October, a small ceremony on the South Shore with 60 people and Margot crying loudly, and Louise, who had been personally invited by Grant himself, sitting in the third row with an expression of deep satisfaction. In the photographs from that day, there is one that Ingrid has on the windowsill in their apartment. Not the posed one, not the kiss, but a candid, taken by Margot's partner when no one was looking. It's Grant watching Ingrid laugh at something someone said, just before the ceremony, still with her coat on, the October trees behind her. He looks like a man watching the one variable that changed every calculation he'd ever made, and being, for once, completely glad of it. She pressed the wrong button. She would press it again every time for the rest of her life.